Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. Today we are here with our special creator, Marine Velvet, also known as JT. You can go ahead and introduce yourself, Marine Velvet.
Hey guys, good to be here with my buddy Tad. We're going to discuss the game. Be sure to subscribe to his channel, Tad Dawes. Be sure to subscribe to my channel, Marine Velvet. And I'm really interested in having this conversation, and I'm sure we can dive into a lot of good topics about the game that need to be discussed.
Absolutely. There's a lot of problems, let's say, in Future Fight right now. So we have like a bunch of questions that we have prepared for today's video. We have some general questions which are not related to the game's problems, but rather on how we progressed and how we started and so on and so forth. And then after that, we're going to start with some of the problems that we have found during our questionings. So for the first question that we're going to ask you is, when did you first start playing Marvel Future Fight?
I first started playing it probably 3 to 4 months after its release. And I think I found it like in an ad or something on like Facebook or something when I had Facebook, because I don't have Facebook anymore. But I was intrigued by it because it looked like a previous game I used to play. I don't know if you heard of Marvel Ultimate Alliance, but I used to play that game as a kid. So I was really intrigued by the game.
Personally, for me, I just found Marvel Future Fight as an interesting game, and I didn't really like try to, let's say, find it similar to a different game. Back when I started playing it, which was probably on 2018, back when the game used to be at a better state than it is now, it used to be, let's say, different than what other Marvel games used to come out with every now and then. Because most of them used to be, sort of generic, but Future Fight, in my opinion, had something different in it, which made me more interested into playing it.
I think that it was a game in development and it did have a lot of potential when it was first coming out. But then like more characters started getting in, and then they've always had balancing issues. I think that's the biggest issue with the game. But it's definitely a game that I wasn't really familiar with, and it took me a little bit longer than others to kind of get the gist of like character building and like what to do and things like that. And I took it to a more tactical approach later on, like with PvP.
Yeah, we did see a lot of your very good guides on PvP, which, to be honest, I don't think many people would understand PvP as it is now without your help. So we do appreciate all of the help that you have given us for PvP.
I'm happy to provide. Um, PvP has the most potential, I think, but people get really, really frustrated with it. But I'll continue to provide tactics and all that. It's fun for me. It's
Yeah,
rewarding.
we can kind of see the perspective on how people find PvP fun.
Well, I think one of the questions was what was my first team that I picked in PvP in the leaderboards, and
Yes.
what was my first meta team where I was very confident in the leaderboards and I was getting in a very high ranking. So yeah, 9 years ago, I was working with Deathlock, Thor,
Oh,
Groot, and Blue Suit Ghost Rider, and I was fighting off against Hulkbuster and Yellow Jacket when they were PvP meta at the time, and it was actually a pretty good tact. I got top 100 twice during that time, and then Doctor Strange came from his first movie, and he broke the game. He totally broke it. So
so
it took me years to get to a level where I could compete again, and I had to test a lot, and I had to build a lot.
that is very
Um,
interesting to hear that you have used probably the most random team that I can hear right now. Groot
Yeah.
alongside Thor. Try to use that today, and I think you'd probably not get anywhere near top 10,000, let alone top 1,000 or something.
Exactly. Deathlock's been needing a rework for 9 years. So, you know,
Honestly, you've seen how the reworks have been going on nowadays. Any PvP character that gets a rework is instantly in the bin.
the the stats are very, very like ultra powerful. So they've done this for as long as I can remember. They'll have a certain amount of balance for a certain period of time, maybe like 6 months, and then they'll release a crazy meta that almost forces you to make a bunch of changes. And guess what? You know, swapping gears and swapping CTPs, they cost a lot. You know, they cost a lot of crystals. They just started making these deals to swap CTPs just recently, maybe like a year ago or so. So it becomes very costly to having to test all the time. And yeah, the meta creep is really frustrating because there's 250, 270 characters in the game and only three could be used. I think that's ridiculous and it really kills the game. There was a point where I was using, you know, my first like real meta team. I was using Silver Surfer with no uniform, Infinity War Thor, and I was swapping him with Cable, blue suit Cable, and I was using Ghost Panther, and I was getting top five against Carl. If you guys know Carl from Challenger League and Vibranium League, he used to be the OG. I was going toe to toe with him in top five with like a crazy team. They were using like Jean Grey with the blue suit and like Infinity War Thanos or something like that with Colossus. So I was always doing these crazy setups.
It makes like, as you can see, like you back then you were able to mix and match the most random teams, and then you'd still be able to make it in the top 10. You can use your most favorite character if you wanted, and it would most definitely work compared to nowadays, where, as you have mentioned, only like around three of them are near meta for you to even be able to use. And alongside that, two of those metas are native tier 3s. So they're going to just break the bank even more than you already have to replace those CTPs.
Players have been crying out for, you know, certain deals. They've been crying out for crystal enhanced rewards. And granted, they started doing it the past couple of years, but there's so many things that players have been crying out for. And the devs always say that they listen, but they don't. And I can name a million examples.
That is true. I don't recall ever like the devs ever like listening. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like game development is very very hard, but it's also not that hard for you to read, for example, suggestions that a lot of people have been asking. One of the suggestions that I have seen is for them to put two CTP choices, just like the one that you have for ISO sets, because
Right.
for characters like, for example, Null, who can potentially be a hybrid, or Thanos, who has double uniforms, it would be very very costly for you to just keep on changing those. So you kind of need a second cheaper option for you to do that, which is the second CTP slot.
Yeah, people have been crying out for that for years, and I agree because, for example, my Thanos, right? He doesn't work anymore in PvP for me at all because I don't carry as many brilliant CTPs, you know? So I would love to have a second slot so I can just pop an energy or pop a rage and I can alternate between them so I still have the opportunity to test in both areas. I think it's greatly needed, especially since CTP swapping is so costly still, even with the deals. So, I mean, there's a lot of changes they still need to make. I mean, with game development, I understand, you know, if you can't monetize live PvP, because of the laggy servers. I get that, and I think they made a decent alternative. But for example, Danger Room, I don't know if you were around when Danger Room was around, but Danger Room had amazing potential. All they had to do was maybe tweak some restrictions. Servers weren't too bad, but they removed the game mode, and I've been crying out for it to revive again. And many players have too, and I think ever since they removed it, the game's kind of been stagnant a little bit. But it's just my opinion, you know? They gotta add more entertaining content instead of like chore content.
That is true because I wasn't in the Danger Room era back then, but I was in the Heroic Quest, I think it was called. But I've heard a lot of people talk about how Danger Room used to be a very good game mode, if only it had just some slight changes. But what you also did mention is how when they removed it, the people sort of started to drift away from the game, which is not entirely wrong because, for example, Danger Room was, I think, maybe I could be wrong about this, but I think it was quite popular. I think it could even be the most popular game mode back then. So when Future Fight decided to remove that game mode, which was probably the most played, it sort of did raise a lot of questions on what the devs can do in the future. What if they have a favorite character or a favorite feature that they want to add? Would they even listen to them keeping that, or would they add it, and so on and so forth?
Right. They did it with like the ranked battle thing where like, you know, each character, if you build them enough, can get into like some ranking. I think that's an okay kind of concept, but the gameplay is just so boring. Like you're just fighting like you know, like a little boss. I mean, there's enough
Yeah,
little bosses around. Like we're tired of fighting
exactly.
guys that shoot you with like pellet guns and like a dinosaur that like, you know, hits you in five
Exactly.
seconds easily dodgeable. Like there's no tactics, there's nothing. It's just, you know, do this, get the reward, go away kind of thing.
Exactly, exactly. I very much agree with this because it also does feel like you're just playing Alliance Battle normal, but instead of you having
Right.
to like worry about the monster that much, this one you just do one cancel, you get like 50,000 points, and then keep on running around until the next cancel comes. And then if you do this enough times, then you've already collected every reward possible, which is kind of niche, honestly. Like, I do appreciate that they added tier 4 materials into this, but they could have made the game mode more, let's say, interesting, not keep it a little bit generic or bland, just like basically Alliance Battle normal, but then this time it's restricting you to updated characters.
Yeah. Like a big money maker for them is milking whales to get their character to like a top 10 in the rankings. So they have to compensate by getting their account near perfect, like their cards and their swords and all of that. And the RNG is already terrible. Like there are still people that are struggling to get 25% pierced. I just got 25% pierced like last month, or not even like 2 weeks ago. So I'm testing it, and I had to sacrifice HP for it, which I don't really like. But damage is necessity. Like pierce, HP, um, you know the statistics that you get from swords, you know, the decreased damage, the increased damage, all of that accumulative is super important, and you have to jack it up because if you don't, you're gonna struggle on auto, and auto is a huge part of this game. Like 95% or like 90% of this game is auto, which tells you a lot. You know, I want to play my games. I don't want to auto my games, but they got to make it more engaging. They got to add more manual element, in my opinion. You know.
That is true. I do very much agree on that because let's not go too far on this. Go to Otherworld Battle. The RNG there is very, very, very terrible. I remember I even mentioned it to you where I told you that an entire level 70 team, which was tier 3, they did have meta characters, yes, like Null and Sentry with their latest uniform. They didn't have any sort of debuff removal, and they were able to one-shot most of my tier 4 characters and with Wasp and with her new uniform. So that includes HP and debuff removal. So it's like logically you would know that my team would win this in a landslide. But I was watching this and I was shocked at how many times they were able to one-shot my characters, which are as perfect as I can get them to be, because both of them have mighty conquest and greed. Surfer has authority, so they are not weak built at all compared to the other team that I'm facing, which probably doesn't even have any CTP. They probably even have obelisks on their characters. It's really bad. Like, I don't recall anything being worse RNG than that, besides the swords, because the swords is a whole different other story. Like, I remember when I was trying to do the swords, which was probably the biggest mistake ever. I probably dropped like 30, 40 mil on this, and I still didn't get a perfect sword. I used the runes where you increase your chances. Apparently, you increase your chances. So I did this for multiple swords, and I think maybe I did like around 50 or 70 swords. And out of those, and I think only 5 of them were from the runes. The rest were just the lower chances one. So it's near impossible for me to perfect my own swords.
First of all, that, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because there are like these special runes that like bump up your chances from 15% normally or something like that to like 25. That is BS. I would say a lot of the time that extra bump of percentage, it really doesn't work. I get a lot of the different color all the time. I don't get the color that it's trying to get. So the RNG for swords are poor. The RNG for cards is poor. I know people who have sacrificed like 20 cards, 30 premium cards to try to get the blue stat star and the HP stat or the all attack stat. Takes them forever. On top of getting the card quality 7, I've only gotten one card, maybe two quality 7 in my entire time playing. With swords, I've crafted maybe like, few hundred, and I've gotten a 5 star, a couple of them, not many. The
Yeah.
RNG for game modes like Otherworld Battle, placement is super important because you realize, maybe the characters that do the most damage for you are fragile. So you may want to put them first in the match. And what happens in the beginning of the match in Otherworld Battle is that for some reason, the entire board does the X skill first. So they just punch the air and then they execute their skill. So that's how the RNG works. Like some tunes X skill takes longer to execute than others. So then they execute the skill faster and then your tune dies instead of the other. So placement is super important. Like you put your heavy damage dealers first, you put your supports in the middle, and then you put your main damage dealer last, but he's got to be like a reviver and probably a debuff master. I love to use that term. Like Sentry, for example, is the debuff master and a reviver. So even today, I put Sentry last in Otherworld Battle, and now I'm winning a bunch of my matches versus losing them, and I'm probably going to showcase it. So, it's really important that people know these things because people spend money on the game, and it's important to know these tactics for PvP. You know.
That is very true, especially how they are spending like a lot of money on this. And I'm glad you even mentioned that other world battle feature where they just punch the air and then after that they deploy the skill, because it's all luck based or very bad RNG. The odds are always against you, because every time I try to watch, for example, my own characters try to fight, they would punch the air just like everyone else, but then they would probably have like a delay for some reason compared to the other team that just directly starts slashing my characters. And then I just look over at my characters, and then I'm just so confused as to how they were able to manage to go first before I do, which is really, really bad for the RNG. Because I've personally spent like a lot of money on the game trying to build my PvP characters. I even am gonna tier 4 Sentry, which is something that I didn't want to do, but currently I'm kind of forced to do that, or else I'd be at a severe disadvantage compared to everyone else.
Yeah, if it was maybe the older Century uniform, you could have maybe kept it at 80 at the time when Null was number one meta. But
Exactly.
right now, Sentry is number one meta. You know, I don't care what people say. I think I've tested it, especially in the auto modes, enough to know that like a fully built Sentry with like brilliant conquest is probably the best character in the game. And like for PvP, I've seen him take down like my Null a lot of times when I'm in Vibranium for like Team Battle Arena, for example. But my Sentry can also take down different nulls too. So I've had only like positive success with Sentry, you know, and his tier 4 is essential right now. Same with Null. It just sucks because there's not many essential PvP characters. Like there's maybe 10, and most of them are not free to play. So PvP is in a bit of an interesting situation compared to PvE. PvE doesn't have that many issues. Like everybody's okay with World Boss Legend. People would prefer 10 slots to play instead of 5. You know, people are okay with ABX and ABL. I think they're fine. You know, they got to fix the disappearing orb glitch, but other than that, that
Yes.
game mode's fine. And yeah, PvP just needs a whole rework, man. Still, even though they're adding stuff.
It does need an entire, like a really big rework. So, especially for example, Otherworld Battle, as we have mentioned, the RNG needs to at least be balanced out instead of trying to just deal with your luck. If they're going to attack first, if you're going to attack first, if you're going to activate their immortality first, or kill their first lives, and so on and so forth. So we kind of need to see some improvements on that side. And I'm glad you even mentioned Timeline Battle, where you talked about Vibranium and stuff, because honestly, I do see here a lot of people say that staying on Vibranium is easy. However, in my experience, I haven't really found it to be that way because of one problem that I've seen many people complain about. I personally even kind of complain about it, but I kind of have found like a different route into it, which is how the opposing side does not have any sort of skill cooldown no matter what you do. So you're kind of at a really big disadvantage because they could pop your immortality or pop your first life with just one simple skill when you could have dodged it by just waiting and hoping that they would have any sort of skill cooldown.
Yeah, that I think, especially for timeline battle, it's such a big issue. And they said that they addressed it, but they really didn't. They actually hindered you more. They said that their cooldown or the AI's skill, their starting skill was going to be different, and that your cooldown for your own skills when you're starting was going to be reduced. They only reduced it by 1 second, and you know they said, okay, let's put Silver Surfer, Sentry, and Wolverine, and instead of having them do their primary skill first, we'll have them do their second skill first, right? But they do their primary skill right after. If they get guard broken, they do their primary skill then. So if Silver Surfer gets guard broken, he'll just go right to the counter. If Wolverine gets guard broken, he'll just go right to his fifth skill. And Sentry's second skill and Null's second skill are their primary skills. So they need to fix the cooldown so people don't have to do crazy stuff on manual play to get ahead. Like I literally have to go move my analog with my left thumb down, and then I have to take my other hand when the countdown is off, and I have to put my right hand over my left hand with the analog stick still down to switch the character so I don't get one shot in one go. That's frustrating. I tried to teach that to like a newish player a couple weeks ago, and he's like, "Yeah, this is impossible. I can't do it." So I taught him, okay, here's how the triple meta should go. Here's why you should have null dealing. Here's why you should have null with greed with ambush, etc., etc. So the only way to counter these crazy vibranium teams is with triple meta or with the same team that they do, which is usually two meta and support. I think this is insane. This is just pay to win, because not every team is the same. Not every player works with the same CTPs. That's why there's a huge need for CTP recommendations and niche suggestions because my philosophy, for example, is attack is the best defense. Most of the time, if I tell people to build PvP meta with offense, most of the time on the manual play, aspect of it, they have success. On the auto, it's different. So the defensive CTPs they put for the auto modes, I understand. But still, this is why you say, for example, people should have two CTP slots. You may need two different PvP CTPs to work situationally, right? So
Yes.
these are elements that should have been added long ago. And now we have this state in PvP where people consider it a joke. In timeline, I'm taking a break. I played 7 matches. I won 3 of them, and I'm in the top 25 in the league. That's how the disparity really is in PvP. Like, not many people play it, man.
Yeah, that is very true. Because as you have mentioned, this entire like when Netmarble announced that they are going to take a 1 second cooldown off of the skill, we're talking about PvP here. If it was PvE, then that would be a different story because that 1 second would probably make an entire difference to, for example, defeating a world boss legend or getting a higher score. But in PvP, that is not going to help that much, honestly, or even at all, because you're still at a disadvantage on the other team having no cooldown whatsoever. So no matter, even if you get that 1 second chopped off from your cooldown, it's still not going to even be close to being perfect because of how the opposing team's cooldown works. They have no cooldown over there. And the only time that I have ever seen cooldown even be introduced into the other team was when I asked you about how Challenger is. You told me that one of the power ups that you can buy is give the opponent a skill cooldown, which that alone is really terrible because you're trying to tell me to try to grind in probably a bad state game mode all the way up to Challenger just so that I can even have somewhat of a fair fight against opposing teams. And as you have also said, for you to even counter these teams, you're going to need 3 metas, which in theory could work, but again, we're factoring in how that 0 second cooldown is affecting us so much that when you start, you're already bound to lose one of the meta characters. It just depends on who you want to lose. So, for example, you have an option between Sentry, Null, or Silver Surfer, or Wolverine, or so on and so forth. You're going to need to choose one of them. You're going to need to think on which one of you to swap into so that you can go ahead and hopefully not get one-shotted by because of this entire cooldown like trickery that they have up on their sleeves. because this
Hmm.
entire cooldown thing is not making this PvP game mode work at all. And personally, for me, I've even stopped playing Timeline Battle. I think I even told you that right now I'm down to gold, or I'm going to probably even go down to silver on next week because I'm so tired of not being able to compete in the top 100 because my team is not strong enough to counter those 0 second cooldown teams. And I played two dealers and one support, so that says a lot because I have to let my Coulson die, my Colossus die, and then after that I'd have to hope that my either Null or Sentry skills are ready and I'm fast enough to even try to deal a single damage or even try to activate their immortality or take one of their lives. And even so, I have done that, they will stun me most of the time. I've always been stunned every single time I try to attack them with Sentry. I've tried to attack them with Null. I've tried to swap play. I've even tried to sort of do what you've tried to do, the whole joystick and then use your right arm and whatnot. None of it worked because I'm 90% of the time that I play, I get stunned. So at this rate, I just give up because my Null's immortality is gone, so he's basically useless. And then after that, he gets one shot, and then I'm left with Sentry, and then he's left with like 3 metas or 2 dealers and one support, and then that's game over for me. So what am I supposed to do? I'm just taking an entire break until I tier 4 Sentry to even have any sort of chance against these god knows tier teams. Like they're very hard for me to even play against.
The problem is that there's just huge disparities. Like the power level between a tier 3 and a tier 4, huge. The power between 13% Pierce versus 25% Pierce, even 22%.
The damage difference is massive. Mighty CTPs versus brilliant CTPs, particularly defensive ones.
Conquest, authority, huge disparity between mighty and brilliant. It's the difference between it working and not working. So in PvP, they're constantly putting limitations on the player, but they're not putting limitations on the game mode. So you got that problem with timeline battle, where there's no
Exactly.
restriction. They restrict the actual meta, like a few times every 3 months, and the teams are legit the same almost all the time. I rarely see anything different. In Otherworld Battle, the opposite issue's the problem. They're putting too many debuffed meta for too long. You should operate like you put Sentry in for a couple of weeks, then debuff him. You should put Null in for a couple of weeks, then debuff him, etc. Because people spend big money for Null and Sentry to be used a little bit more. It's just in timeline battle they're used too much. In Otherworld battle they're used not at all. In team battle arena they're doing this again. Like, I'll give restrictions sometimes, and it'll only be like a little, like maybe two, three, four actual working tunes, and we'll do
Correct.
that like once a week. We'll maybe ban Null once, and we'll ban Sentry once. It's only been a few weeks, but I'm already seeing the same recurring pattern with these restriction issues. If they fix these restriction issues, people would want to use their roster more, a lot of their roster more. Imagine if Sentry, Null, Wolverine, and Silver Surfer were all banned in the same week. That would be crazy. We would be seeing Thanos again. We'd be seeing Adams again. We would be seeing Carnage come up. We would be seeing,
Exactly.
like a lot of different tunes. It would be amazing. That's why I say the game will have so much potential, but the developers are just insanely greedy. They only care about their bottom line. They say, "Oh, I'm not going to fix timeline battle, I'm gonna make another game mode where it's like the opposite of timeline battle, but there's just different problems with it. Like they need to make a game mode that's fun and that's engaging, and you get to work with your teammates maybe to fight the boss, or maybe there's like a similar PvP uh, set up to like AC, but it's more like you put maybe you and your allies team against another two teams. I don't know. There's a lot of different ideas you could do with PvP, but you have the problem with the servers and you have the problem with the arrogance of the developers. Because I think they know that these changes would be revolutionary. They know this. There's no way they wouldn't know this.
That is very true because they 100% know this, but for some reason I do not know why do they never implement any of these ideas. As you have mentioned, for otherworld battles debuff, that is probably one of like the most like something that I don't even know how to understand. I hit Vibranium only once in my life in Otherworld Battle, and I instantly got demoted because I did not know nothing about this entire debuff removal things. And it was just complete nonsense when I first saw it. And then I said, it's fine, maybe I'm not made for Otherworld Battle. But as you have mentioned, for Timeline Battle Arena, the new game mode, the restrictions are not like anything new or anything like, let's say, revolutionary per se. They're just basically the exact same thing that they have been doing, but instead in a different game mode. Like the last time I saw a restriction when I think I was in Vibranium, I saw Dark Avengers get restricted. I looked at this and I'm like, who on earth still uses centuries old uniform? Who's going to like ban Dark Avengers? And then I said, okay, maybe some people still use it. And then this week, I think Jean is banned. Dark Phoenix characters are banned, which honestly, it's not even that big of a deal because it's only one character that can instantly be replaced, and then bam, you're going to keep on playing against the same team over and over and over again, which you're going to get zero competition against because you're instantly gonna lose because they're approximately the same team, if not better. They're probably more whaled than you. They're probably VIP 20 compared to us who are maybe VIP 7 or 8. We have no chance in competing against those teams at all because this whole entire restriction thing is so limited. Like they could, as you have mentioned, ban four specific characters, most used characters, and then we're going to see entirety of new rosters. I could be seeing Jean, I could be seeing Adam Warlock, I could even be seeing Ghost Rider, I could even, I don't know, maybe potentially see Black Panther over there, even though he's not meta. But the idea is you would be able to customize your roster, be able to do what you want if those top 4 metas have been banned. The chances of them even doing this is near zero because the issue with the developers is they do not listen to a single suggestion that any of the users have made. And to compensate, quote unquote, compensate, they gave us that 10,000 gems to compensate of them saying that, oh, look, we're listening and we actually care about the community. But the 10,000 crystals is not really gonna fix any of the issues that we've been seeing throughout the entirety of PvP. We want some actual fixes. We want game modes that are not stuck on auto. Because on auto, you are always on a disadvantage no matter what your team is. You have a brilliant Conquest Sentry with a brilliant Liberation Agent Venom and a brilliant Conquest Null. You're still going to lose against some random ass team because it's an auto game mode that doesn't even know how to play. Your AI does not know how to play.
Lots of problems. I mean, you can even see like in the lower leagues too, same issues. The 10,000 crystals. First of all, they took it 10 years to give us something like that. You know, like after multiple boycotts about the overpricing of tunes that become outdated in like record time. Like I don't know if you
Correct.
were around when the Ultimates came out, but the Ultimates was the biggest scam the game had, and it was a huge boycott that ended up like reducing the cost of the characters and the RNG. Netmarble completely abandons them, because it's like that was a bad business plan that they did or whatever. Imagine, I mean, you look at the meta and you're saying like even if I used meta, I still couldn't compete with whales because of the disparity. Imagine non-meta, Daredevil, Elektra, Mr. Fantastic. Like these characters, they're never going to shine ever. They're going to be left to rot. They're going to have like a month or two of value because people are testing them and trying to get some value potentially out of their favorite character that they can't use. You know, the one thing I will say, the one thing that could maybe save them is tier 4 strikers. I think the tier 4 striker system is cool. The striker like an opportunity through like another character, I think is great. I think what they did with Bishop, I there's a lot of conflict, right? So like we can talk about Bishop, right? Bishop
Yes.
has PvP qualities, right? But he doesn't work in PvP. Now, he could have a hybrid CTP like Destruction, for example, and now people are saying that he's fairly decent in PvE. So that's what saves the game. But the character is completely wasted for what he was supposed to be meant for because of all of these like weird plans that Marvel does with PvP. So a lot of people's favorite characters just getting wiped under the dust because of the system that they created. I don't see any purpose of like really competing with non-meta in PvP, and on top of it being insanely difficult.
I'm happy to find tax and alternatives, but they need to change the system first.
Many of the people's favorite characters just plummet. When you mentioned like a month or two, that's being generous. I haven't seen
Right.
Daredevil. For example, one of our friends, he is a big Daredevil fan, and when he got that new uniform, I didn't even see him use him for like a week because of how bad he was. He instantly tier 4'd him the same day, and then he gave him a brilliant conquest, hoping that he would be a fantastic or even maybe good PvP player. But no, as soon as he used him, he was utter trash. So then he just tier 4'd a useless character that's just rotting in his roster right now. Maybe we will never see a new uniform for some characters. For example, let's take Black Panther, my favorite character. I don't think that he's gonna get the uniform anymore because of they're not going to make any more movies. But the thing is, I'm probably never gonna see him become anywhere near a meta or even PvP meta or anything like that. So it would just like take the joy out of the game from me because I'm not playing with my favorite character. Your favorite character, Ghost Rider, he's semi niche if I'm not wrong in PvP. He can still be used there, however, he's not as strong as many others that you can go ahead and tier 4. But again, we're playing this game because we want to play with our favorite characters. Like one of the ideas that I think that they could try is to try to make a sort of a balanced system for PvP characters. For example, in timeline battle, they would restrict the top 30 meta, and then you're forced to use those niche PvP metas, which will not turn out to be niche anymore because you'll be able to use them against other niche PvP metas, which would be such a fantastic idea that they could try and do. But knowing how Netmarble is, I very highly doubt that we're going to ever see any good ideas come out of them.
That would, first of all, that would make a lot of characters worth it. That's number one. Number two, they have to add mechanics that actually function. Like, let's look at dodge characters, right? They have this guaranteed dodge percentage that only seems to work when you have the statistics to already back it up. If you don't have the statistics, it's just not going to work at all. So, like, you know, I had to jack my Spider-Man up with HP Urus and Odin's Blessings just to get his mighty conquest to function. Daredevil, Daredevil needs an actual working dodge mechanic. You can't just give him a little bit of decreased damage and a little bit of dodge, like 30% guaranteed dodge, because yes, let's face it, normal dodge is useless. Like normal dodge itself, it is just like a flat statistic. It offers nothing other than like to help with rage, CTP for
Absolutely.
example. That's it. Guaranteed dodge was supposed to fix the dodge mechanic, but it didn't. It just became like its own little thing. So, like Daredevil, for example, he needs so much to succeed. And yeah, the friend, I think I know who you're talking about. I tried to save the tune for him. I tried to get like some sort of value. I literally couldn't. Like I had to barely kill a brilliant conquest Silver Surfer with my Daredevil level 80 and my Punisher level 80 together because neither of them can kill Silver Surfer by themselves unless you have like a brilliant conquest on Punisher. Who the hell is going to put a brilliant conquest on Punisher? You know how hard it is to get a brilliant freaking conquest? I got my first
Absolutely.
one 2 months ago. I got my first one, and I put it on Logan, and it was ass. It wasn't even that good. I had to bump him up to death with freaking Odin's blessings and HP. I had to sacrifice a lot of my offensive options, right? There's many things that I had to learn. I had to self-teach myself that the skill on debuff removal overwrites your debuff removal lead. So then people always ask me all the time, why is my tunes getting stun locked? Right? Another thing, Doctor Doom, for example, and also Daredevil, you give them debuff removal leadership. They have a skill that has debuff removal for 1 freaking second. So now they're just practically useless. They just get stun locked for 90% of the fight. And then they introduce counters that involve getting hit with super guard break, and it's useless. The only time it works is against a niche tune that doesn't have super guard break. So it's like, once again, the disparity is too much. And the amount of patterns and statistics and things that you have to implement in order to figure out, it's too time consuming. I use my favorite tunes in PvP with a 50% ratio. People look at me like I'm insane because everybody's ratio is like 90 plus percent. It's a lot of memorization, it's a lot of pattern recognition, and the reward is just not worth it. They have to fix the system, or else they're gonna produce a lot of like useless tunes that don't work.
Especially since you also mentioned about Doctor Doom, which we'll come to back in a second. However, another thing that you have mentioned is how you have used like the most random characters. Like I was browsing some friendly matches on Timeline Battle just for fun, just to see some of my friends' squads, and I came across to your squad. I was very confused as to why you chose such a random squad, but at the same time, I was thinking about it. Like, you use this squad because you're trying to play the game in a way that you enjoy. You're not trying to play the
Right.
game to, for example, be like the best or try to fit in with the crowd. I don't want to go double support null. I don't want to go with null sentry and colossus and so on and so forth. You want to play the game the way that you think it should be supposed to play, and in a way that you're going to have a lot of fun with. So I 100% understand how you and why you chose such a team, but at the same time, honestly, Netmarble should try to like open their minds a little, realize how most of the people aren't even using any of the meta squads because we can't afford it. So expensive. Like native tier 3, both of them, the only two metas that you can think of are both native tier 3. And on top of that, you're going to need to tier 4 both of them because they're going to need the tier 4. So you're going to essentially drop around, I think, 25,000 to 30,000 Carbodium just to tier 4 both Sentry and that is only for their gears. That's excluding the advancement that you have to do for you to even get them there. And on top of that, you're going to need to build them from 1 star all the way to 6 stars. And on top of that, you're going to need to get a PvP CTP, which the drop rate of CTPs is so bad. Those chests, I never got anything good out of them. However, the only time that I even got a good CTP was when I spent crystals on the legendary mission. I think I forgot the name of it. I haven't played that one in such a long time. You get like a selector out of it, and then you get a rage or a conquest or so on and so forth. Conquest isn't even there. That's the worst part. You have to rely on the chests and hopefully get a conquest out of it, which it's a very low chance. And as for Doctor Doom, he was the most anticipated character that I have ever seen. People like got hyped about him. They were waiting so long for him. He got like the biggest betrayal I've ever seen. Like
Yeah,
as soon
like
as he betrayed,
the trailer for him, like his video, everybody was hyped. He got one of the best trailers with him playing on the piano, and people were saying how he was unusable, completely unusable. So I had to figure him out, and I made him work with something like some CTP that was hilarious.
but yeah, and as you have mentioned for the trailer, the the amazing part about the trailer is the piano scene was the actual track. Like they hand animated all of it to be correctly on track. So it wasn't just like some random keys. I remember someone saying that this was the actual piano track that they have spent all that time on. And then they decided to drop probably one of the worst PvP characters that I have ever seen. Although they did, I think they buffed him only a little, slightly in one update, but even then that buff did not even do anything to even make him anywhere near. I've only seen him like a few times, which was on Otherworld Battle, but that was only because he was not debuffed as much.
That's why I almost feel in my head that a bunch of the developers don't even play their own game. They gave Doctor Doom a tune with a revive, because revivers don't really work that well with counters. The only one that really did it was Silver Surfer. Doom came out terrible and broken, and he was working like very sporadically. They people wanted him to work for Timeline Battle, and that was like his worst game mode by far. Like I put something like Transcendence on him, and I actually made him work because he was actually killing the old Century when he was meta at the time. I figured him out. I felt like he didn't really need the rework that he got. It made him worse. And when Null came out, forget it. He was completely useless for me. Like he couldn't even trigger debuff removal. He couldn't even survive long enough. He couldn't get the counter. He couldn't get the penetration from Mighty Transcendence off. Nothing. So I dropped him. And I even dropped him for the auto modes because what's he gonna do? He's gonna execute one or two counters, maybe a fifth skill. The premium character, like he's premium.
You're like supposed to know that you're supposed to make that character fantastic, at least be top 3. But no. At this rate, as you have mentioned, the devs probably don't even play their own game. I'm not joking. I feel like they just pull like a random numbers generator and then they start spamming until they get whatever number and then they just place that onto the character. because the character just it never has any sort of like good stats or good numbers that we have seen for many of the other characters. It just feels so randomly generated.
At the end of the day, PvP is just gonna become more and more isolated. There's like only like maybe a few whales who actually stay and compete in the respective leagues, and like that's it. There's no way around it. I could try to make counters as much as possible, just to give new characters as much value as they can. The value is always going to be niche. The game's just going to remain stagnant.
Honestly, I don't understand what's the point of them just making like these useless characters. Like the only upside I can see this is for whales, as you have mentioned, but like even then, those whales that we're talking about are whales that are VIP 15 and above, whales that we can't even compete against. And at some cases, they might get it to work. At rare cases, we might get it to work, as you got Dr. Doom to work with a transcendent. It's so bad when a transcendent, one of the worst CTPs ever, works on a terrible tune. So that alone says a lot. But if we're trying to compare progress between us and whales, we would be nowhere near, because the whales probably right now in their inventory has at least like 20, at minimum 20 brilliant CTPs. They could be brilliant conquest, brilliant authority, brilliant so on and so forth. We cannot compete against those whales. Let's say that we even do get a brilliant conquest. For example, it could work on a terrible tune. If we want to re-roll that, we would have to submit a CTP for it, which is already hard enough for us to get. So this is just generally such a big mess for PvP.
And I mean, this is why it's so important for proper testing. People get the recommended CTP to pick, and all of a sudden they're going around all Discord messages saying, "Oh, my character doesn't work with the recommended choice, and he's not performing well at all. So what do I do?" And who's going to give the answer? I mean, Commander doesn't really engage with his fans like that. Like, he's not going to get like questionnaires from his fans and he's going to answer them. I tested an energy CTP on multiple different tunes, and turns out they work incredibly well. But the only way I would have figured it out is through all of the testing that I had to do on manual to do it. I can't get it from Commander. I can't get it from Cynic Alex. So it's a shame because it's so complex. If you want to do something different, you still have the risk of it not working out for you. People desperately need alternatives. If I didn't know any of these alternatives, I would just either be another whale or I would be anonymous. I would just be another anonymous player.
As you have mentioned, for the content creator issue, like for example, let's say someone's got suggested to maybe put a patience, for example, on a century, and then that doesn't work. What are they gonna do? Because, for example, if they're free to play, they're not going to be able to mess so many CTPs because they don't have that many gems. And if they have the wrong CTP on them or the wrong build, then the amount of gems that they have to spend is abysmal. Because let's say the first one didn't work out, who knows if the second one will work out? The content creators don't really engage with their fans, which is not a good thing, especially for like those bad characters that people are trying to build because they're their favorites. So for example, Dr. Doom is still favorited by many and is still being built to this day, yet people do not know what to give to him because content creators don't really interact with them or try to give them some sort of reasonable advice as to why you should give him, for example, a transcendent, why you should give him a region, and so on and so forth. I feel like the only quote-unquote playtest is the practice combo, That's all I have ever seen the devs and the YouTuber variants for Future Fight ever test. What am I gonna do for practice combo in PvP other than maybe Alliance Battle to check how many hits? But that's for PvE. What if I want to know for PvP? How am I gonna know? I do not want to know how their walk animation is gonna be or how the skill is. Like, I want to know the actual performance behind the character. Try to test against top teams and then show us why this character is good or bad.
Yeah, exactly. Like with their gameplay trailers, since the Jean Grey trailer, their trailers have gone so far downhill in their quality. So if they're going to reduce in quality of their trailers and they're not going to pop anymore and people aren't going to get excited about them anymore, they should at least give gameplay so players know, hey, this tune can definitely be used in this game mode and this game mode and this game mode because he has this, and this. But instead, yeah, they go into the practice, they do this basic rotation that they just made, and they give like a really cheap and brief explanation of what they have without giving the time and anything like that, etc. It should be up to the developers to at least somewhat teach their players how to actually play because otherwise people are just lost and they're so reliant on the autoplay system because of this. So then the autoplay system obviously brings the cycle of like picking the same tunes, etc., etc. And then YouTubers just follow the trend. They give the easiest and most basic test and they play few times. They don't really put that much emphasis. I mean, the only one who does is Commander. People are left to kind of figure it out for themselves. And while I think it's fine, you're supposed to figure things out in the game, this game is too complicated and it's too expensive, like we were discussing, and it's too narrow in choice. I get tons of questions all the time about how I should place my tunes in Otherworld Battle or who I should deal with in Timeline Battle because my three meta are getting absolutely obliterated. Or like in TBA, why doesn't Thanos work? Or why doesn't this character work with debuff removal? Or why does this character work without debuff removal? Like these things matter. These are tactics. But the game developers, I don't even know if they know any of these tactics.
Practice combo, the combos that they're doing, that is the most random combo I have ever seen.
Yeah, it's
Because
basic.
it's not just basic, it's not the most efficient one, it's very, very useless, and it deals the least amount of damage that I have ever seen. This especially applies for PvP because back when I started playing the game again and then I bought Sentry's new uniform, back the dark version, I checked their combo system, to check maybe it could work in PvP. It did not work. It was very terrible. Like I kept on getting my two lives just instantly destroyed. The only reason I was even able to survive was because one of our alliance members told me that his rotation, which was 5 cancelled to 2, was his most efficient one that you can go ahead and use. As soon as I used that, that's when I started to win my timeline battle games. That's when I started to figure out that Future Fight's developers don't really care much about the rotation. They want you to take a long ass time, and by the time that you even figured out the actual rotation, that character is probably out of meta long ago.
Right.
And another thing that you have mentioned is how the characters, like, how they don't say anything about the characters. None of what does it have, none, not skills, nothing. And another issue with that is if you want to test, you're going to need to buy the uniform full price sometimes. Sometimes it's discounted, sometimes it's full price. Regardless, you buy it, and then you're going to test it out, and then you're not happy with the results. you can't refund the uniform. You have to keep it with you, regardless of it's good or bad. You've just lost 1,750, or even up to 2,500, or 3,250 gems if it's a native tier 3. So that is a lot of gems for you to spend on a character that you're probably never going to use because it's been very bad for you.
On top of that, the old uniforms become completely useless. And people have suggested the idea to be able to migrate the dated skills, the skills that function on these skins interchangeably. So you could use whatever skin you want and use the skills that are dated. I think that's a wonderful concept, and it gives value to like old uniforms. Like, I don't like Loki, right?
Yes.
Loki has PvE value. I would love to use Loki's PvE value for Loki's silly, stupid, classic uniform that they released for like 750 crystals and they brought it down to 300 crystals. That people went with these uniforms and they're like, this is the worst uniform I've ever seen in my life. And they're really like doing injustice on these classic uniforms, and people still have to spend the crystals for them to be useless, like never used again, collecting dust. Like this is embarrassing. It's embarrassing for the game. How much wasted crystals did people spend? They gave a freaking entire like a stat list of like what you've done, and you know, people have spent 1,000,000 crystals, 2,000,000 crystals, 5,000,000 crystals. These numbers are absolutely ridiculous. And a lot of those crystals are wasted.
Honestly, I'm not a huge fan of the new Black Panther comics uniform. It's good, but I'm not a fan of it. But I am a fan of his movie uniform. It looks very clean. I like it, but I can't use it because it's very outdated. So what can I really do about it? I've just spent that much amount of crystals on it and it's outdated. So what can I do with it? What can I use for it? Nothing. And I want to use the Civil War uniform because it's what I have started out with. I can revisit nostalgia. That is a very good idea that I really, really, really do hope that they listen and do eventually add it, because then the crystals wouldn't be a waste.
They gotta implement this eventually. They gotta implement like the interchangeable skills on uniforms, because I think that's where most people's crystals go. They go to uniforms. This game needs quality of life changes.
That is very true. And the same thing can also be applied to Sentry. His newest Thunderbolts uniform. It's not the most appealing in like the appearance wise. I really liked his merged version. It looked very good. It actually showed Symbol that he can do something. He can actually destroy characters, which is why this whole idea of implement skills, newest skills into older uniforms, which by the way is very, very possible. It's not even that hard. I've used to make games before, and this is not a hard implementation to put. The devs, I just feel like they're just very lazy. Like, honestly, yes, I do appreciate them sometimes putting hard work, but most of the times, features like as good as this one or as small as these is what can make the game go from its current performance to a rising performances. What's stopping them from adding such amazing concepts or such amazing ideas? Like, go onto any form, any of their updates, look at the comments, and you're going to see so many people wanting this feature, that feature, this feature, that feature. Why do they not just make a new forms post and be like, publish your ideas here, and we will pick, for example, the 5 best ideas, and then we will add them to the next update. And then those who have been chosen get a reward, for example. You know how good this can be for people with really good ideas?
Have you seen the state of the forums? It's a complete crap show. I mean, I go there occasionally, because I promote content on there. Their community is a big representation of their game. You know, it's fractured, the community. There's a lot of good people who ask help, who give help and give advice based on their own testings. And then there's a bunch of toxic people who create alternate accounts or like to get the post like banned or something like that. So the developers have just completely abandoned the forum because of all of these issues, and they have no reason to monetize it. And that should be the best way that people could communicate their issues with the game. And then they send tickets. Sending the ticket is like freaking a mission to do, and they give this generic ass response that's like AI generated, and they just say it's up for consideration, and they give them a thumbs up, and have a nice day. It's pretty sad. Like, people have done this all the time, and they've only implemented a couple of changes out of it. Forum is a huge representation of their failure to listen to the community. So now there's parts of the community that just wants to see the destruction of the game. So they'll be as toxic and they'll be as ridiculous as possible to try to deter people away from giving advice or asking questions. I mean, I could try to help the forum, but it's definitely not the place to go, unfortunately. And it's the only place to go to ask questions. It's really sad. It's the only place to go to send tickets.
As you have mentioned, I was even one of them who even asked for a suggestion. I sent them a suggestion, and then they just gave me like the most AI reply that I have ever seen. Like, what do you mean you're gonna put this into consideration? I didn't want you to like just give me I'll put this into consideration. I want you to tell me why you think this idea could work or why this idea could benefit the game. And as you have mentioned, the forums is probably the worst place for you to ask advice in, because I kid you not, when I back then every tier 4 I used to post it in the forums. But now I don't, because every time I, for example, tier 4 an old character per se, let's say Captain Marvel for PvE, I always get comments saying, oh, why did you tier 4 her? You could have tier 4'd such and such and such. I don't want people to tell me what can I do when I know what I'm doing. But on the other hand, for those who need advice, they get the worst advice possible. Like, to this day, honestly, Jean is not bad, I will say this, but she's not recommended. Her typing is really, really bad. But new players, like literal new players that just signed up and are asking for advice, I see comments, go build Jean. Jean is a really good character, one of the best PvE characters. She's fantastic in PvP and so on and so forth. Why are people still like being so inconsiderable, including because they want to stay free to play? Jean is nowhere near free to play, so this is a really, really bad thing.
I think with Jean, it's an interesting situation because she's an old character who's been meta in like a lot of respective modes for a very, very long time. She was meta in PvP back in the day for like extended periods of time, even when she first came out with no uniform, to when she came out with her blue uniform, to when she came out with her recent uniform. Her recent uniform, the only thing I'll say about it, it's that it's a good example of Netmarble making a good tune that represents the value that lasts long term. Okay, she's lasted multiple years as a potential meta for all areas of the game. Like, she's still like a like 12 to 15 character in PvP, and maybe she's like, I don't know, top 5 or something in PvE. Is she tricky to use? Absolutely. Is she expensive? Yeah, kind of. Are there new players still coming into the game? Yeah, there are. So even though she's like, you know, 7 years old, and many whales have her already, including myself. That doesn't mean that every person has her. And that doesn't mean that she should be recommended as number one. Maybe like top five, whatever it is. But specifications are important. Being detailed should be important. Unfortunately, there's YouTubers, I'm not going to mention any names, but there's YouTubers who just grift. They just sell their person, or they sell bad ideas with minimal testing, but they just gain their fan base, so their fan base will always protect them. There's a toxic disparity between YouTubers and players at times too. So it makes me really sad because I'm privileged to have fans. It's not an entitlement because my work is my work. It has nothing to do with like whether I deserve something. It's a huge honor and a privilege that people recognize my work as valuable. So in return, I'm happy to give as much detailed advice as I possibly can about this game because I know how important it is.
Honestly, I've seen those YouTubers before, and I'm just very confused as to why they recommend probably the worst characters that they can. Because, and as you've mentioned, with minimal testing, they just say it out loud, blur it out, and then that's it. Call it a day. You know, this is the best character. You don't need testing. That character is so good. They don't need testing. That's not how you predict a good character. I don't go out and tell people, oh, Black Panther's newest uniform is the best in PvP and PvE. I don't go do that because I have proof that he's not in meta anymore. But however, I go give out other advices with actual proof, providing telling why this, and this are good in this, and this. And as you have also mentioned, having fans is really, really fantastic. So when you give out the advice and people go ahead and share it, tell other people that it's from this certain creator, it's such a good feeling because you've done something correctly that you know that the people are enjoying. But sometimes you get overshadowed by those people that don't know much about the game. They would go out and then they'd say, oh, this character is like this, but because a certain YouTuber said it is, they're not that good anymore. So you get overshadowed, and then after that, some people would come and lash out at you, telling you, oh, why did you recommend me to go build this character when this certain YouTuber said that this character is not good anymore, and so on and so forth.
These YouTubers with their freaking titles, like it absolutely like makes my blood boil. I swear. Like, Black Widow, Ultimate Queen God Super Alpha Omega Meta who kills and slays centuries. And then I go and I look at the video and Black Widow killed Sentry halfway and then got obliterated and lost all of her fights. Every single one of them. And it was only covering like one game mode. And I'm just like, dude, do you have any shame in clickbaiting? Like are you really that desperate for the views, right? Because that's what a lot of these YouTubers do when they cover PvP and then they rely on the auto mode to try to win and they don't use their brain. And then they say, oh, okay, I know what will make the character work in manual play against 2 meta with support. I'll put Black Widow with Agent Venom and Wasp. So that way she has double support so she can kill a meta maybe with a super brilliant conquest at its full role. Like, first of all, nobody's going to do that. Second of all, it's still not working. It's still not working. So Commander, I almost slated him. Commander is going and saying, Deadpool's the top 5 character, better than the meta at the time, whoever it was, with a brilliant conquest. And I'm going, killing centuries and whatnot with Deadpool with the exact opposite CTP that he recommended. And I'm still thinking that he's not meta. And it's again with the title and with the language. Like, oh, I said maybe. I didn't say he was. I said maybe. Well, it's like again, it's like people are investing their time and you're saying information that doesn't apply to everybody because people's accounts are different. So you're recommending the super luxurious option, and then all of a sudden it doesn't work because it's at Mighty Conquest, or it doesn't work because you have 19% pierce, or you have like 50% HP on your cards. Like there's a lot of contingencies to these things.
You know, these like YouTubers, I just genuinely like I laugh at how I see they get thousands of views when they say when as you mentioned a clickbait in the title, you'd click on it and then you wouldn't even see their Black Widow killing anyone. Instead, the Black Widow just gets one-shotted by Colossus, for example, and then after that they give her probably the most whale build ever, and then in some rare cases she does eliminate Sentry, but even then that Sentry is probably having like the worst build that anyone could have ever seen, probably a rage on him or something. They're so funny, like I just see it and I'm like, we work so hard to make our content as viable as possible, and then we've seen these people who are saying Black Widow killed Sentry's double life. And then you'd go and click on the YouTube video, and then it's just some random ass Sentry without any uniform.
Yeah, it's like a regular region Sentry, like in Gold League at tier 3 with like 2 other meta and like their tier 3. It's like, dude, like come on, man, like
It's so
at least
funny.
at least go in another mode if he's not gonna do well
Exactly.
there.
Exactly, like it's so funny when you look at them, and then they try to defend themselves by saying, "Oh, look, I didn't say that she killed a top tier Sentry. I just said she killed Sentry." Which, in Future Fight knowledge, if you read a title that says, "Oh, this character killed Sentry," you would be interested to know because maybe that could be meta. Maybe they killed a top tier Sentry. And then you would not expect a tier 3 level 60 Sentry to be playing against the Black Widow, or a level 50 null or something. It's so bad yet so funny.
It's the reason why I have a YouTube career in the first place. Is because I capitalize on people's disingenuous behavior and their desperation for clicks. And they're almost like audience captured. It's like they just want to appease their audience in any way that they can, and then it ends up leaving some of their audience disappointed, but they still end up getting like a cult, kind of like a cult following in a way. So they always get protected. They always get protected for not putting in the required work necessary to actually test the character.
They know that it's going to backlash them at some point because maybe one of them is going to follow their guide. Oh, give a brilliant conquest to Doctor Doom. He's very good. Someone would actually go waste a brilliant conquest, probably one of the hardest CTPs for you to even get your hands on. It's something so prestigious in the game, and then you go put it on Doctor Doom. And then you go ahead and try Doctor Doom in timeline battle, and then he gets one-shotted by a weak-sided sentry. And then that same person would defend that YouTuber. Why? Because he's like, oh, I just played bad. I just didn't know how to play him. Give me a few months for me to learn how to play the character, and then you will see me progress and then kill Sentry, just like how my favorite YouTuber did it.
Well, yeah, I mean, by then it's too late. Like you can't take a few months to test the character because they release a character every month. Multiple uniforms a month. It's really annoying that people can't really test the character properly, and then people have no alternatives. Oh, just pop a conquest, pop a greed, pop a conquest, pop an authority. It's very simplistic People need alternatives. Like you'd be surprised how many PvP characters are proc friendly. All of a sudden, I'm using PvP characters in PvP and PvE too,
Yeah,
and
you
people
told me
didn't even
about
know
that.
it existed.
Exactly. Since when are they able to do such PvE game mode? And it was like such an interesting fact, but no one knows about it because none of the creators are even bothering to test their proc friendliness.
No, and they'll also look at you like you're crazy. Oh, you put
Exactly.
an energy on Carnage? You're crazy. Why? You put a greed on Carnage. What's the difference? The guard break immunity? Guard break immunity is outdated. It's outdated. Super guard break immunity is what's important. And if you didn't know, super armor with debuff removal is guard break immunity, but people for years don't even know that. Like, super armor has been in the game for 10 years, and they just are figuring out now that debuff removal and super armor is guard break immunity. That's, for example, why Silver Surfer can work with a refinement, and people are wondering why. You know, so I put energy on Silver Surfer, and people are gonna look at me like I'm insane, even though Adam, second best CTP, is energy. Adam and Silver Surfer are identical. They are legit identical in their builds. It's just Silver Surfer has reflect. But you don't dare to try to test Silver Surfer with energy, even though Silver Surfer with energy two shots meta, especially now, because Sentry from his new uniform versus Sentry versus old uniform has changed significantly. So because of the change, some tunes need their builds redone because of this. So, like I said, there's no testing, there's no alternatives. People just lazily pick the easiest option with the least resistance that can give the least pushback. So,
Exactly.
it's like you get rewarded for being part of the crowd, and then you get criticized for going against the norm. Doing new things with it is shunned down upon at times, especially by YouTubers. It's really sad. It's sad, you know? And new players suffer the most from this. New players.
Exactly. If I'm not mistaken, I've seen like people test this, and if I'm not wrong, he was equivalent to Captain America's zombie uniform, if not slightly stronger, which goes to show that you can test and do whatever you want. It's just that you're trying to fit into the normality of the people. Oh, you put an energy on Carnage? Ah, you're weird. That's the worst thing that you could have ever done. But then, oh wait, you realize that it's very, very good. But the only reason that you didn't try it was because you were trying to fit into the normality. You didn't know that he was proc friendly in the beginning until you saw someone do it. And then you decide to do it yourself, and then bam, look at this. You've got a really good Carnage. I have not seen a single person bash down on Adam being used for energy. Why isn't Adam being bashed down, but, for example, Silver Surfer or Carnage are being bashed down even though they're all proc friendly? Each one of them just has like a slight different PvP aspect into it. Like you can test so much that you can't even comprehend how good certain characters can be for different types of CTP. But again, not a single YouTuber is going to do those tests because then people are going to look at them very weirdly. Like, why are you doing such a abysmal thing even though it would work? Like, when you told me that Carnage would work with an energy, I was shocked because I have never seen anyone even mention Carnage working with an energy, which is why we do need more people to speak out on trying to test out new characters with newer CTPs and other CTPs instead of having to stick with the PvP variants like Greed, Conquest, Refinement, and so on and so forth.
There's two ways that you can play PvP. You can go full on defense that's complemented by offense, but the offense has to be stacked. Or You can go with pure offense. And for many people, they don't even think that's an option because they're going with the norm. And it totally is. It's a total like other choice that you could make. With defensive CTPs, there's way too many contingencies. Your statistics have to be near perfect, but if they are, then fair play. Then you could probably use, and they have most of them have to be brilliant defensive CTPs. If you make your characters offensive with a decent blend of defense, 60, 70% HP, maybe if you can, maybe 40% all defense, you get your swords up, you could compete with mighty CTPs on manual. You can, at least in one aspect of PvP. And then on top of that, you potentially have more PvE characters. So now you're working in both sides of the game because you changed your approach to PvP. I'm trying to change the mindset, and this is like an impossible task. I'm trying to change the mindset of the way people view PvP. Because if they do, there's going to be a lot of different choices that can actually work, you know? And then I was saying, okay, like if you put energy and things like that on PvP tunes, then you may struggle in the auto modes, which is maybe true in some cases. But I mean, dude, I went in Otherworld Battle in like the third portion of the season. I played 100 matches for the season, and I had 4,000 points in Challenger League. Okay, I was doing all right with offensive CTPs on autoplay. It's just because I know how to play the game mode in multiple different tactical ways. I mean, I'm still looking into Team Battle Arena a lot more. Like I'm testing more. I'm trying to get into the top 100 there. It's difficult, and you have to use your brain a little bit. New players need to recognize this because that way, not all hope is lost for them.
I don't want to see like new players just looking at, for example, certain YouTubers, and then they'd say, "Oh, you must get a conquest for this character. You must get a agree for this character." When they can test and try to figure out which CTP is perfect and which CTP can work. But at the same time, we don't have content creators that do this other than you and potentially some others, but I'm not 100% sure about the others. But I know 100% that you are willing to sacrifice a lot of gems, a lot of your time, just so that you can show other people that PvP is not a game mode that only needs certain types of CTPs. So, like only Conquest or Greed. You show the people why for example, energy could work there. You even got transcendence to work in PvP. We need more YouTubers, more content creators that try to show new players how any CTP that can work on certain characters if they meet the correct criteria.
And I mean, I don't like to brag about like what I do or anything like that. It's just I know that there's a need for it. So I'm happy to provide because I love this game. Like that's just how I feel. Even though this game makes me want to throw my phone across the planet when I play it, I love I love this game, and I've grown to love the community. So I'm working to try to make this game as engaging and as memorable and as good as I possibly can. Because that's the only thing I can do as a content creator. I don't really care about the views. I don't really care about the money. I don't really care about the recognition. I care about the game succeeding for another 10 years.
We're trying our absolute best over here to try to just get more and more players into the community, try to get them more familiarized with how the community is. We can even go ahead and grow a bigger community than it currently is and have a much more helpful community, you know? We want to try to make this community as helpful and as guide efficient, as informative as we can possibly can. Most of the time the developers isn't really gonna listen to it unless we try to push the community, which is what we're going to try to do. And besides, we've mostly covered everything that is possible in the game right now. So we've tried our absolute best to cover, and we just hope that the community can share and tell the people how we can make this game even better.
We covered a lot of important elements. We covered important suggestions. I think there's many more we could cover. Maybe we can make another one of these little podcast videos. Maybe we could discuss like characters individually. Like if you want to ask me about a specific character, like top 10 character, top 20 character, top 30 character, I could probably tell you. You know, it'd be fun to do.
Me too, honestly. So we can go ahead and make something like this in the near future, hopefully. Especially since we're talking about our favorite game, then I suspect that a lot of people would want to watch and figure out what's going on with the state of the game.
Yep, I think that covers a lot of my basic feelings about PvP.
I hope you guys enjoyed the video. This was very fun, and I'm very happy to be doing it with none other than Marine Velvet, which I do advise you guys to go ahead and subscribe to him. He's a very fantastic PvP god that you can go ahead and also follow his guides. His guides are fantastic.
Good to talk to you, Tad.
The same goes to you, my friend.